Okay, welcome everyone. We're going to talk about graded assignment 4 today. I'm going to share my screen, and I think we'll just start just by looking at the instructions for this thing, so everyone gets a sense of exactly everything that is required. This main page where you have the assignment instructions kind of talks about these sections, right? Getting started, HTML, CSS, submitting your work. So the getting started is really just about setting up the project so that you can manage it with version control with Git. And then also ultimately you'll be at the end for submitting, they talk about like actually matching it up with a remote repository on GitHub, and then you can submit that link through Canvas to, to turn it in. And they also talk about this bonus mission with GitHub pages. I will demonstrate that for you guys too. The main thing I wanted to just to be clear on is the middle parts, HTML and CSS, they're in two separate pages. So I've got those up here as well. Here's the HTML part 1. And it also says getting started and getting to work, just because that's their format for these pages, right? Getting started, getting to work. But that's essentially what you need. You need the main page to get you from start to finish, and then the HTML page part 1 and the CSS page part 2. And we'll work through all of that. But you know, the main thing to note here is they kind of tell you exactly what types of things are required for your assignment. You have to have at least, these, at least one of, this. They want you to have your images in a subfolder called images. So I'll demonstrate how to do that. And they talk about using HTML entities, and they want you to be creative, see what else you can learn and add and go beyond just the minimum. And then they talk about the developer tools here. I will demonstrate that for you too. And then about, adding and committing your changes. And then again, on the part 2 page for CSS, they kind of go through and say, they want you to use margins and padding. They want you to make sure that you've created CSS for at least one of each of the following types of selectors, like just a regular element, like an H1 or a P, a class where you actually create something that can be used on multiple elements, and an ID, which would identify a very specific element. So I will show you examples of those as well. And they want you to kind of follow the rules of using CSS, using the style sheet itself to control the style of the page, not using so much, the document level or inline styling. And then again, just kind of, encouraging you to be creative, not just to check off the list, because you really can have fun doing whatever you want. So that's really it. And they walk you through this whole process here of how to set up the project on your local computer and to create your files and to use Git locally. And then they wait until the very, very end to have you set it up with a GitHub repository. So you have those instructions here. I don't have to show that to you. So what I'm going to do instead is show you, because there's multiple ways to do it. I'm going to show you a different approach, and that way you'll have more than one approach to choose from, depending on kind of, what you feel most comfortable with, what your preference is. I will say that for me, generally speaking, my preference is to start with GitHub, because I want to go ahead and have that remote repository there to back up my work. And to just because I have been burned before with, my hard drive just dying suddenly and losing things locally. And when you're working on projects, obviously you do not want that. So I will show you how to do that. So let's actually just start there. Let's get a repository on the remote side. So I'm just going to choose new. I'm in my account here. And I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it easy as apple pie, because that's the name of this assignment. And it tells me that that's something I've never used before. That's all that means. And so it's easy enough to do that. I can add a description if I want to. I could say this is a prep exercise for launch code students. it's I guess redundant for me to say this, but to prep for graded assignment for HTML something. Okay. And I'm going to make it public, obviously, because I want others to be able to see it. And I'm going to add a Readme file. You should generally always do this and have something there. With some of your smaller things, it won't be as big of a deal. But I could add a get ignore with this kind of a project. I don't really need to do that. All that is for, I think Chetna talked about that. It's basically when you have certain files that you don't want it to pick up and back up. You just want those to stay on your local computer. And when you get into bigger projects and you have like a really big library like Bootstrap, or you have maybe it's like things like you know, authorization keys, authentication stuff, where you want to hide sensitive information. Those would be the kinds of things that you would not want to be copied to the remote repository. You guys don't really have to worry about that right now. And then here they give you an option to choose a license, which is something somebody had asked about, and you definitely will be talking about this in Liftoff after you graduate, when you're doing the career and project units. So for now, let's just go ahead and start with this. I also want to point out, because this came up the other day, about a year ago, I think, GitHub changed it to where instead of using master as the kind of default main branch, they actually are calling it main now. And you can change the default name if you want to in your settings, but they have switched this over. And so you'll find that when you are cloning projects from launch code down to your computer, it's probably going to be on a master branch because they created that a while back. It's not anything new. If you create something here like I'm about to do, it's going to default to main unless you've told it otherwise. So you're going to have to pay attention to that, because whenever your general instructions might tell you to, like, you know, merge into main or push to main, or they might reference master or main, you have to keep in mind that it's probably one or the other. So you have to just check and make sure which one it is you're working with, and don't accidentally create a second one, because you need to only have one or the other, if that makes sense. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay. So let's create it. Enough talking about it, right? Okay, so now we have our repo. It's got a README, doesn't really say much other than my name and my description. I can change that later. I will change that later, because what I'm going to do ultimately is have starter code and solution branches here, and I'll have some instructions about how to access those so that you can look at the project in different phases of the code, okay? For now, we are just going to get started. So if I already have this and I want to go ahead and clone it down to my computer and get them synced up right now, I can just grab the URL for that here. I've got it in HTTPS. It's because I am not using an SSH key at the moment. So I'm going to grab that. All you have to do is click on that little clipboard and it copies it. And then I'm going to head to my terminal on my computer, and I'm going to clone it down, but I want to make sure I'm in the right folder first. So right now I'm in my home folder. You see I'm just in my home directory. I am going to go over to this location, which is where I have all of my repositories for student practice exercises. And I can list that directory, and you can see a bunch of those. And this is stuff that is coming up for you guys, right? So you see references to assignment 5, assignment 6, and then things like the DOM and fetch and forms, TypeScript. Let me get this over here. And Angular. Those are all things that are coming up in the last part of the curriculum that you're working through right now. So things to look forward to. So, but we're going to create a new one, and we're going to call, let's see, I probably should have named this. In fact, you know what? Look, I'm going to show you something. Let's say you change your mind about what you want to call your your repository. So how did I do this? A5 prep, yeah, okay. So you can actually go into the settings here and change the name as long as it doesn't already exist. It's not a big deal. It's still going to stay connected to your local one, but it's obviously generally better if they are both named the same thing. So I'm going to go ahead now and just say that. How did I do that again? Prep. Yeah. I'm just going to call it. Why don't we do this? I will. Apple pie. I'm just going to do that so I know which one it is, but it also has the same general naming convention that I used before. How's that? Okay, so I've renamed it. I'm going to grab this clipboard thing again now that I have a new URL. And now that I'm here, here's the thing that you want to be careful about when you're cloning GitHub repositories. You don't ever want to accidentally end up with one repository inside of another, because it really screws things up. It'll get real crazy, and it can be difficult to extricate if you don't know exactly what you're looking for. So I am always very careful that this directory holds a bunch of GitHub backed up projects side by side, but I never go inside any of them, just this folder. And this is always where I clone things so that they'll just be side by side. So you might want to just think about that for planning ahead, since you're going to have a whole bunch of launch code stuff coming down the pike. You're going to want to have a folder where you put things, and you want to make sure to always be in that location when you do your Git clone, like I'm doing right now. I'm going to do Git clone. I'm going to paste the URL, and that is going to create the folder. So if I actually do another directory listing, you can see now that right there, well, right here, I now have that among all of my other exercises, okay? So that's great, but then the key is that you would have to, so if you wanna get into it, you can do like this, and you'll notice that as soon as I did that, I can teach you guys separately later how to do this, but I have my terminal set up to where it always tells me what branch I'm in. And so you can see automatically, as soon as I got inside where the repository is, it shows me that I'm in the main branch. And all that's there is that Readme file, right? For now, we're gonna change that. I also can do an ls-a to see the hidden files. And that's where you can see that Git file right there. And that's what handles all of the version control. So the existence of that makes this a Git repository. And it's now already, because I cloned it, this way, it's already linked now to GitHub. So we're not going to have to worry about that at the end. Okay, so we're in pretty good shape. I think what I want to do here is I want to open this up in VS Code. The instructions for the assignment will tell you to do everything in a text editor, and you can totally do that. But you can also do it this way. So I'm going to show you this as an alternative. I'm going to say open folder now that I know it already exists. I'm going to find the right one. I've got a lot of stuff, y'all. I need to clean up my stuff. Here we go. My most recent one. So this is the one I want. So I'm going to open that. Oops. Go back. I'm going to click on it, and then I'm going to say open, and then it'll open the right folder. Okay. You'll know you're in the right place if it has the name of the folder here, and then any files that are inside it are all that are listed here. If you open something like too far up, sometimes things won't necessarily run properly. That's a problem more if you're like working with Angular or things like that. But we're going to keep it simple, make sure we're only opening the folder for the project itself, particularly because we're working with a Git repository. Okay, I can close this welcome tab. I can look at this if I want to. You can see, there's the stuff that we saw when we were on GitHub. But I want to add files. And so I'm just going to use this handy dandy little thing right here to add a new file. And I'm just going to call it index.html. That is the base file for any directory. If you were to navigate right now to this, it would automatically assume, even if you didn't type in the index.html, that's what you wanted for that directory. So that's what you want. And then we're also going to create a styles.css. Maybe we'll just call it style. .css, and we will get to that in a minute. And you'll notice that VS Code has picked up on the fact that this is an HTML file and this is a CSS file, and it's got some different little icons here to represent that. So we're not going to worry about this one right away because that's in part 2 and this is in part 1. But I just wanted to kind of show you, you've got some files you're working with, and I think what I'm also going to do is copy over some of the instructions that I had written for this. So I'm going to create a text file because I always have this extra stuff for you guys, right? Since I don't have a fancy website for it like Launchpad does. Okay, so let me grab all of this and put that in here. Okay, and I also have a resources file. What just happened? Sorry, hang on. Yeah, there we go. So I'm going to go ahead and put this stuff in here so it'll be there for later and we can refer to it and talk about it. This basically is just some of the things I'm going to say is in writing here about formatting HTML, CSS, using color codes, how to decide what units you use for height and width, embedding images, etc. Okay, there's some information on that. And then the main thing we need right now is normally you would just kind of do this, elsewhere, but since this is a kind of a project that I'm putting together everything in one place for you guys, I'm gonna call this content planning. And this is just kind of to help you think through. Oh, I grabbed the wrong thing.
Hey, Carrie.
Yes.
I have a question about the difference between how VS Code does the open editors and then it'll have the project that you're working on right underneath. Like, what's the difference? Like, why? Because right now it's all the same. So like, why even have one tab open editors and then the other tab the thing you're working on?
Because if I close some of these,
oh,
it only shows what's open.
I see. Okay.
Thanks. Yeah. Because when you're working on a really big project, like I'm working on this thing at work, there are hundreds of files. So you'll have the entire tree, from here down, and then only what's open will show up here. Gotcha. So yeah. Okay. So the content planning, essentially, I'm going to go ahead and copy all of my stuff that I've already got and we'll talk through it. But let's look at the instructions first so you'll know kind of what that is. Okay. So the idea behind this project is to write a how-to, something that you know how to do and you want to tell other people how to do it. So something you're good at, it could be, organizing a closet, making paper snowflakes, recovering, refinishing furniture, cooking, baking, mending a hat, et cetera, right? Anything you can think of. And when you do this for yourself, you do something that means something to you and something that you're passionate about, and that is kind of a good scope. You want it something that's not too involved. You can break it down in like 3 to 8 major steps, and each step should only have like 1 to 4 sentences. So not too complicated. And before you code, you want to start planning. That's what that content planning is for. What elements are you going to need, and what are the requirements, and kind of how can you plan it out so you know what content you're going to have before you even decide where you're going to put it, right? Wireframing is something that you will learn more about in Liftoff for your capstone project. However, if you are in the front end track, you'll learn about it in track 2 if you're in Coder Girl front end. I'm going to qualify that because not everybody who's going to watch this video is going to be Coder Girl. So yeah, if you're Coder Girl and you're in front end for unit 2, you will learn about this ahead of time. But it's essentially just planning out, sketching things out without a lot of details, just to get a sense of where everything is going to be located, what the layout's going to be. What we're going to be doing today is going to be really simple, so it's not a very complicated layout because we're not even going to be using any sort of layout tools or frameworks like, Flexbox or Grid or anything like that. We're not doing that today. We're doing very basic HTML. But you still want to kind of know where you're going. And so you want to kind of have all of that done. I do not have an example of a wireframe for this, unfortunately, but I can show you what a general example would be. Let's look at wireframe examples. Let me find you. Yeah. So this is a pretty good one. There's actually programs for this, but the idea is really just to kind of say I want to get a general sense of what my layout is going to be on my page, and maybe you have some like lorem ipsum, like fake data or whatever in place. You generally don't use very specific information. It's just enough to represent the information that would be there. But yeah, so that this is always a good practice. This is an example of where someone has kind of sketched it out, and really this is a true kind of first. This is not even a first wireframe. It's probably a second. You could be even simpler on this. Is obviously a more complex page, but doing it by hand is fine. Just I actually prefer to do it that way. Get a sheet of paper out, and so the sky's the limit. You have, you're not boxed in too much by anything yet. You can kind of make some notes, and be creative and kind of see where that process leads you. And then once you have a good idea of everything, then you can kind of move forward. Okay. So the kind of requirements for this are going to be similar to the assignment, obviously. You need to have, your head, and you've got to have the body of the document. And then you're going to use some broad elements. There's the semantic elements like header and main, article, section, footer, all of the little basic old school ones, H1, H2, P, HR, image, all of it, ordered list, unordered list, all of these things. You can throw those in, but the main thing is to not do any inline styling, just do straight HTML. So, the assignment has you actually doing all the HTML first and finishing that section, and then, getting all the content in there. And then part 2 is CSS. So that they want you to, and this is actually pretty normal, and it's a good way to go, to not get so focused in, even though I am the type of person that just is ready to make it look pretty. Like that's where I go, because I love the design aspect of things. But you need to make yourself kind of take a step back and just focus on getting the content there, even if it doesn't look pretty. And then once it's there, you can start changing it. And I'll show you what that's going to look like. Kind of, you'll see it changing over time as we do that. Okay. Yeah, there's just basic instructions here about like, linking your style sheet to your HTML. And I'm going to show you how to do all this stuff. And then bonus mission, it says, is to add Google Fonts so that you can do something other than what's native to the browsers. So we will get into all of that. So the content planning, basically what I've got here is a title. Logo's optional. I'm not going to use a logo. And I just have my title. I kind of have a little tagline, which is in and of itself optional, but I decided to put it in. And then you want some sort of intro paragraph. And I want to emphasize right now that I'm talking about my instructions for this exercise. This is not necessarily how you're going to do your actual graded assignment. Okay, you can decide how you want to structure everything and what you want for your assignment. But for mine, my kind of guidelines for this particular exercise is to have an intro, to have a kind of list of things that you need, and then a list of directions. And then I'm going to kind of, I went and I found some images, and I initially, tapped into my Google Drive to get them, but I'm going to show you how to like just put them into a folder directly into the project. And then links, for my purposes, I don't think you're required to do this for graded assignment 4, but for this exercise, I said you needed to have at least 2 links. And so I'll show you how to set those up too. So I went ahead and I kind of, filled out this content. I wrote it out. I wrote my little intro paragraph. I wrote out my list of ingredients because I'm doing a recipe, obviously. And then I wrote my instructions and I was like, okay, so this is just me kind of just getting the content ready. It's obviously not in any sort of HTML. It's just over on the side, but this is just my kind of planning area. So if we want to actually start putting this together and getting the content in the page, we will do that. Before I do anything else though, I want to, I just pulled up that terminal. There's lots of ways to do that actually. You can do, nope, that's not it. Sorry, man. Give me a second. Okay. I'm losing my mind. Okay, I don't remember what it is. You can go up to terminal here. Oh, there it is. Yeah, so you can do control tilde and it'll actually bring up the terminal. You can also come here and say new terminal, but there we are. We have our terminal and we can work right here inside VS Code. I like to do that because I like to be able to do all of my Git commands here so I can really see what's happening and not rely on what's built into VS Code where you're more limited and you can't see what's going on behind the scenes. So I highly recommend you you need to get lots of practice doing it this way anyway, but I would recommend sticking with it. So I'm going to say get status. It's lagging on me. Sorry, here we go. Okay. And you'll notice it says that my branch is up to date with origin, but it's showing that I've got untracked files because I just created some things, right? So if I want to be able to add those, I think you've been shown a number of ways to do that. You may have seen that there's the ability to do git command -a to like, I'm sorry, git commit -a, and that would like commit them and add them to stage them all at the same time. I would recommend against this, and the reason being, all of these files right now that are untracked, they would not get picked up by this at all. So the way to make sure that they get picked up is to just add them all like that, git add, and then dot to include everything. So now if I do a git status, you can see that they're all saying that they're changes that are staged to be committed, right? And they're green, that's how you can tell they're there. So once you're sure you've got everything that's exactly what you want, you can go ahead and make the commit. So I'm gonna do git commit, I'm gonna add a message. You should always do this, write something that makes sense and is specific enough, it doesn't have to be long, it just needs to be specific enough so you can tell your commits apart, what happened when. So in this case, I'm gonna say, added instructions, resources, and content planning, and initialized index.html and style.css. Okay, so that covers what I did. And I think I had said before that I was not going to do everything on the main branch. So let me see. You will stay on main. I think what I'm going to do is switch over to a new branch though. And so I'm going to create a new branch. Oh, no quotes. And I'm going to call this solution because we're going to build the whole thing out, right? And then when I get done, I will create another branch that backs things out to like a starter code so that you guys can pick up from there. But let's do this. And so now that I'm building it, we will do it here. Okay, so I now have a new branch. Anytime you want to see all of your branches, you can just do git branch and it'll show them, and you can see that it's got the asterisk by solution and solutions in green. That means that's the one I'm currently on. In VS Code, you can also see that down here. In the corner, it shows you which branch you're on. And because I have my terminal set up this way, I can also see it there. So I have lots of clues as to which branch I'm currently on. And then we're gonna get started on this. So let's get into this HTML and see what we can do. Very first thing you want to do is, I don't remember if So a little hint about VS Code. If you just do a exclamation, I'll do that again. If you just do an exclamation point, sign, thing, bang, let's call it bang. That's what we use in the coding world. And then you hit the tab key, it automatically creates your basic structure for you, which is really nice. And you always have this at the top. And then HTML opens and closes at the top and the bottom, right? Inside that, you have the head and the body. And just to emphasize how these are nested, I'm going to do like this so you can kind of see that. And then inside the head, this is where you have all of the kind of behind the scenes stuff. So these meta tags have to do with the information about the information. That's literally what that means, meta. And so this is stuff that browsers hook into, especially search engines, to kind of know. They know how to display it. They know how to find it. And if you have like additional, there's a lot of other meta tags, but if you had other things, it would play into that. Okay, I'm not gonna say anything more about it. We'll get sidetracked. But title, this refers to not the title that would be like visualized on your page. It's actually the title that you see at the top of on the tab. So like when I'm over here on LaunchCode's page, this assignment, number 4 right there, that's actually coming from that title. That's where that's coming from. So we'll call this easy as apple pie, since that's the name of my version of this assignment. If you go through and you do a version of this on your own from the starter code, you call this whatever makes sense for you for your page, whatever you actually decide to do it about. Okay, and then the only other thing we need to add here is our link to our style sheet. I think they actually go through this in part 2 on the thing, but I'll go ahead and do it now. So you typically want to have, I just totally messed that up, sorry. Okay, it should say that it's the type of link is a style sheet. I'm sorry, not type, the relationship is I think that's what that stands for, how it relates. And then the type is text CSS, and then you have the actual location. And all I have to do is say style.css because it's right here in the same directory, okay? And that is a self-closing tag, so it doesn't have a open and close thing. So that's that. And then later, if we get to the end and we want to add some Google fonts, we'll add that up here too. But for now, we are done with the head. So let's move on to the body. Now, we know that from our content planning that we have a title and a tagline that we want to have at the top. I don't think I said anything about the footer here, but I'm gonna create one. So we'll have a header, we'll have a footer, and then we should have a main section that pretty much holds everything else in between. And inside that, we can decide how we want to do this. Do we want to use section tags or article tags? So let's start kind of getting that mapped out a little bit. Why don't we start with the header? Hang on. Yes. Yeah. I'm going to start with a header tag. Oh my goodness. And because I am in VS Code, it's like, creating the back end of this for me. So we'll have that. And then let's say we have a main. And then after the main, we're going to have a footer. And inside main is where we're going to have the bulk of our content here. And we had an intro, and then we have like the whole recipe, right? So I think what I'm going to do is create a section tag for the intro. And because the recipe doesn't actually have to have that, that's really just for this page. And then I'm going to use an article for the whole recipe. A lot of students will ask, what's the difference between section and article? pretty much both of them are used. What they have in common is that they are used to kind of like designate parts of the content on the page, separate from other parts of the content on the page. But an article very specifically is intended to be something that would be like standalone. So for example, I don't want to put like my ingredients inside one article tag and my directions in another article tag, because then they don't stand, they can't stand alone anymore. They need to be together. So they would all need to be inside the article together. So let's put some comments in here just to make that clear. So right here, and by the way, writing comments in HTML is a bit of a pain. You have to do like this and this, and that creates it. But if you use command /, it does it for you. It's a lot easier. Something I've been trying to get myself in the habit of doing, because it is a lot easier. So we're going to say that this is our intro, and then the article is going to represent, and see, there we go. Let's do this fast way. There we go. This is going to represent the entire recipe. Okay. And then why don't we break up the recipe inside with some sections, and then that'll kind of help us do that. So I think we'll call this, the ingredients section, and then have a section for that. And then I think directions, then I have to decide. Yeah. And I forgot to put my notes. Okay. And then I think I'm going to add one last little section here that will just be for the variation, because this recipe, I make it different ways, and I'm going to talk about a little variation I've got at the end. Okay, and then there's the end of the article, and then yeah, I think that's all we need. Okay, so let me pull this down a little bit so we can kind of look at it all at once, just to make sure everybody's clear on what's happening here. Inside our body, where all the content that's visible on the page will be, we have a header, and we have main, and we have a footer. And those are all, you can see indenting is really, really important, just like it's important with, for loops and, if then conditionals and functions and all those kinds of things. It's really important in HTML so you can tell what is inside what. The nesting is very, very important. So you'll notice I've got this set where it tabs every 4 spaces, which make, I think the default is usually 2. But I like to use 4 so that it's super clear, and I don't get confused about what's where. So you can see very clearly, header, main, and footer are on the same level. And then inside main, I've nested section, article. And inside article, I've nested section and section. Is that clear? So this is the main structure for all the content that we're going to add. So now that I kind of have this decided, where I'm going to put everything, how I'm going to structure it. And this is not entirely from a layout perspective. It sort of is, but mostly it's just to keep the data organized, so you can tell what goes with what. We will start adding, we already added the title. Oh, except for I didn't actually customize it that way, did I? Yeah, I wanted to say it this way. So let's put that in. And then my tagline. Oh, right. So I'm using this for 2 things. So inside the header, I'm going to have 2 things. I'm going to have an H1. That's the largest of the 6 header types that are built into HTML. They automatically give you a little bit of styling that's kind of built in. Basically, an H1 is just big and bold, and it kind of goes down to a regular size by the time you get to like H4 or H5, I think. And we can customize that to our heart's content. So we'll see what this looks like in a second. And then after that, I'm going to use an H2 that is going to just be that tagline that I had. So let's grab that. Okay. And I don't know why it keeps doing that, but it did. So to clean that up a little bit. Okay. And that's it. That's all I want in my header. Now, something that if you write this in like a text editor, you can like just literally go and open the, from your folder index.html, you can just open it in a browser as is. I'm going to do something different here because I have these extensions, and one of the extensions I have is called Live Server. And it actually lets you kind of run something live so that with every change you're making, you can see it as it happens. And I really like that. When you get to Angular, Angular kind of has that built in already. But for even just basic, your own basic pages like this that aren't with a framework like Angular, you can do it with Live Server. So I'm going to, the way you use it once you have it installed is just to right click on this and say, open with Live Server. So when I do that, and it's opening, of course, on another monitor, so hang on, I'll get it back. Here you go. We can see that I've got my H1 and my H2. Yeah, so it'll be difficult on this monitor to see these changes. I'll put it on the left, how's that? And then it'll be easier. And then put this over to the right a bit. I don't want to cut off what you guys are going to be able to see in the video. But yeah, so we'll kind of be able to see some of the changes as we're adding things. Okay, so let's go back to content planning here, and we're going to grab our intro. And there's nothing really special here, so I'm just copying and pasting and putting it in the tags that I want. But what I do want to do here is I don't want to throw the text just in a section. I want to give it something that the browser automatically understands, which is a paragraph. And it has its own styling. Like if you put another paragraph after this, and I just say paragraph 2, oops. Notice how it already has like some spacing between the paragraphs instead of it being right up underneath it. That's kind of the default for P elements. So, there are some things that it kind of gives you, and this goes back to the mid-90s. I can attest to this. When I first learned HTML, this is what it all looked like. And it's just stuff that's built in. But with CSS, we'll fine tune exactly what we want all that to look like. So I'm going to take that back off because that was just for purposes of showing you that little thing. And okay, so now we are getting into the ingredients. And this is where it starts to get, you have to be a little bit more particular about things. Because in order to make a nice list, and if I want to actually do it with like an unordered list, I'm going to have to use a bunch of tags. So the first thing I'll do is go ahead and just, create ingredients. And so now we're down here in this section, right? I'm going to create the ingredients inside of an H3 tag, which is going to be another header that I define. And then after that, I'm going to have my unordered list. And then we'll have all of our list items. So that's what the LI tag does. They're called list items. You can use these inside unordered lists, and you can also use them inside ordered lists. And we're going to do that down here with the directions. And so then I would just kind of, put these in one at a time with my content planning. And because I have a whole bunch of ingredients, I realized this would be a little tedious, but trying to do it once. However, I also have this in another file. So I'm just going to go grab the rest for now. But you get the idea, right? You have, and see there, sometimes when you paste things in, it messes up your indenting. So keep an eye out for that, because you can see right now it's got these LIs lined up with the closing UL. And I don't want that. I want them to be nested inside like they're supposed to be. Does that make sense? But yeah, you can see as I'm adding these that they're showing up over here on the page just as expected. We have, bullet list. That's what an unordered list is. It's a bullet list. So we've got all of that. And then for the directions, I kind of want to do the same thing. I want an H3 again. And oops, I said directions. Okay, and then we're going to do a similar thing, except for it's going to be an ordered list this time. And then my list items are going to have, let's see. Yeah, So I wrote this like this, but if I was to copy and paste this with the numbers and then also put them inside the list item tags, it would duplicate the numbers, and that's not what I want. What I really want is just for, I just did that to make it easy to read, kind of, this is where I'm headed just for my planning purposes. So I need to make sure to only put just the actual words in, and then you should see over here how it shows up with a number 1 automatically, right? So we'll do the rest of them that way. And I don't want to do that until later. Okay. I'm gonna do a couple of these the long way for a second here. My reasons will become evident later. Okay, and we'll do the next one. I am doing that out of habit, so I was, yeah. You are not required to do a whole lot of this kind of stuff, so make it as shorter as long as you want, but bear with me for just a second while I get this in place. Okay, and then these I can borrow. Man. All right. I need the next one, which is carefully place number 6. Yeah. So we've got this one, and then the last one is here. Okay. All right. So we have all 7 in there, each with their own list item tag. And that's how it tells them apart. And right now it's just a bunch of plain text. Later on, we're going to add some links in here. And that's why I was being fussy about how I was cutting and pasting. But yeah, so I mean, this is starting to come together, right? We've already got a lot of content on here. So the last thing I had was this little variation section for here. And it looks like I forgot to actually put the section in place. That's okay. And then down here, the footer, we'll put something in there too. So let's get this variation. And I'm gonna add this in here, but how do I want? I think I want to do, I'll put it in a paragraph, but I actually want to take this out and put it in an H4, which is yet another variation of, variation's the wrong word, but yeah. It's another type of header that's built into HTML. Okay. So we'll have that, and we'll style all of this later. There's the H somewhere. We'll style it later, but for now, this is what it looks like. And you can see, the way things are kind of spaced out, it doesn't look natural because it automatically adds so much extra space underneath these H tags. So we'll fix that. We'll customize it with some CSS later. So the footer is the last thing in terms of getting text content on the page. And I think all we really want to do here is just have a regular paragraph. And this is where I'm going to use an HTML entity. This is a common one that I think they even talk about in the instructions that you can do. Oh yeah, copy. That puts a copyright symbol. And then you can say, I actually technically did this last year, so we'll do that and see. Yeah, you see it's got the copyright with the year, and does it look better to push that back? Let's see. Yeah, that looks better. Okay. But all of that is now on the page. We got text. It looks very mid 1990s because there's no formatting whatsoever other than what's native to the browser. Okay. And I think the only other thing we really want to do is add our pictures, right? For now, we'll go ahead and get that in. And yeah, and then we'll talk about adding our links. And then I think we'll move on to the CSS after that. So for the photos, what I need here is to have, I need to have a new directory. And I'm just going to call it images. And then, right now there's obviously nothing in there, but I can add things to it. And because this is on my local system, I don't have to use crazy CLI stuff. I mean, I can literally just go to the folder in, using Finder on a Mac or Windows Explorer on Windows. And I can see that that's the folder that I created from VS Code, right? So I'm literally going to drag these and drop these, and those are the pictures that I want. And now they are there. They are pretty large. I think it would actually be better for them to be smaller, but I'm not going to take the time to run them through an editor right now and make them smaller. We'll control the size in terms of how big it is on the page using CSS. But ultimately, in terms of loading time, you don't want your files to be this big unless you actually want them to be visible this big. So if we're going to want them smaller, ultimately, yeah, I probably should go back and actually make smaller versions of them. But we'll go with it for now. It's not going to break the bank because A, it's local for now, and B, it's only 2 pictures. Okay, so they're there. If we go back to VS Code now, we can see that they're right there. And they're green because they are brand new files. Git recognizes that those are new, not just modified. This kind of pale yellow color here, that is Git saying, hey, you've made changes to the file since the last time you committed. So that kind of helps you keep track of that too. So we've got them in there ready to be placed, but we haven't placed them. So let's place them. I think probably I'm going to want remember which one's which. Apples, yeah, let's put this one here. Okay, so I think we'll put the first one in the first section, just kind of up here. And I'm going to use a regular image tag. And then I'm going to give a source that tells it where to look. And wow, that wasn't interesting. I think VS Code thought I was, thought it was smarter than me. Okay. What I actually want here is images / and see how it's suggesting? It knows what's there. So I can actually just tab over on that, and there it is. And you see that it's massive, and we don't want that. So we'll fix it eventually. Okay, and that's all I need for now. When we get to the point where we are applying some styling to this, we'll add some classes. But for now, I just need the source just to make it, actually be on the page. And so I can do the similarly, I can do the same thing down here with the second photo. Let's put it here. And we'll just do that one. I think it's, yeah, baked pie. All right, so we have now placed both of our images in, massive though they are. And we can see that they are where I placed them right now. They just are directly ahead of the H3, but we'll make it look nice where they'll actually just be smaller and they'll float off to the side, and it'll look much better when we get done. Okay. So the last thing is we talked about maybe adding some links in here, right? So I'm going to go back and to the direction stuff that I have down here. And then on the second one, I'm going to paste it in and then we'll talk about it. Let's just do that. It'll be easier. All right, so I'm going to replace this so that you'll notice that I still got the list item tag, right? It starts here and it ends here. And then inside that, I've got this A tag, which stands for anchor, that wraps around the text that I want to be the link. So inside that, we'll talk about what's here in a second. Inside between the A and the /A tags, you'll see that there's this funny looking thing here. That's another HTML entity. And that one stands for right arrow. And then I've got the text that I want to also be part of the link that you can click on. So in order to tell it where to go, we have an href, and that is the link that will take you to that page, whatever it is. And in this case, it's to a YouTube video. And then I also have this thing called target. And This is super old school and it still is what's used for this. But if you do not want them to open it and have it replace the page that you're already on, if you want your user to click on it and go to another page so that your page stays open in their browser in another tab, you can just do this underscore blank, and that will actually send them to another tab for that. There's other options for this. Primarily, if you use it, you're probably going to be using it for this though. And that's going to be pretty much all you need for that. Just tell them where to go and how to get there. In this case, it'll be by way of opening another tab. So we're going to do the same thing with, because I have 3 different things. That one is a really interesting video about slicing apples like an engineer, is what they actually called it. And I adopted it and I love it because I don't ever like angle my knife ever again and like practically cut my fingers off. Okay, so yeah, there's some great ideas about how to mince ginger easily. And then this one has some really great tips on how to make decorative top crusts if you like to be creative with the top of your pie. Okay, so now that I've put that in, you can see there's that arrow, the right arrow entity that I added. And there's the text that I added, and all of it is in blue or purple. Purple means, I'm sure you guys have seen this when you're on Google or whatever, purple means you've already visited that. And I had this open earlier today, so it's showing me that it's already been visited. This one, it has not yet been visited, so it's still a nice bright blue. And there are no kind of special effects here other than you'll notice that anytime you use the anchor tag, it changes your cursor automatically to be a pointer. And psychologically, people after all these years have just naturally know that if your cursor turns into that, it means it's clickable, right? So it has the kind of classic underscore. The underlining thing is what has always been there for links. I'm not a big fan of that, so we will probably take that away when we do some custom styling. And we'll make it look exactly how we want to with the colors that we want and everything, and not have to have the classic blue and purple stuff going on. Okay, I think that's everything for now, other than styling. So yeah, other than styling and other than Google Fonts. So let's go ahead now. I think we're at a good stopping point now. We've got all that content in there to do another commit. So I'm going to do git status again. I always want to take a look and see what's been done. And you can see that it's acknowledging that I've made changes to my index.html file. And it also recognizes that there's a new images folder. It doesn't need to list all of the files inside it. Automatically just says basically this whole thing is new. So let's just acknowledge that with the folder, the whole folder. But it does have multiple files on it. So again, I want to do git add dot so that it includes everything, and I can verify it with git status. And yep, there it is. And see, now it actually breaks it out and says you've got 2 new files and you've modified this one. Okay, good. So let's do a commit on that, and we'll do -n to get a message. And we've got a lag. Yeah. What's going on? Okay. Yeah, so we'll say added text and image, let's say text, image, and link content to page. And added 2 photo files to new images folder. How's that? I think I can spell it right. I think that's pretty descriptive. Pretty clear that that's what's been done. So here's something interesting. If you're ever curious about kind of your past commits, you can always go look at them by doing git log, and you'll see the history, and you can see there's the most recent one I did, and then it'll go in reverse chronological order. So there's the second one I did, or actually I guess technically that was the first one. And then you just use Q to get out of that and get back to your prompt. But we've got it. So now, if I wanted to go ahead and save what I've done so far, like especially if you're like at a stopping point for the day, either for like part of the day and you're not going to come back for several hours, or maybe it's just for the end of the day, it's generally a good idea to push your work to GitHub and back it up before you walk away from your desk. So let's just say we're going to do that now, since we're pretty much done with the HTML portion, before we move on to part 2 with the CSS. And I'm going to do git push. Now, if I just do git push the first time, it's going to say, sorry, can't do that. But you'll notice that it tells you what you can do, which is to add this information. And that's because this is a new branch. Solution doesn't currently exist as being tracked on the remote repository. It only exists locally. So you have to actually set an upstream to the remote location, which in this case, by default, is named origin. And then you just have to make sure that the name of the branch matches so that, so that it's apples to apples, so to speak, from your remote to your local. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to show you a shortcut to that. Instead of the set upstream, you can just do -u and then finish with origin and solution. And that will get the job done. So it tells you what it's doing, tells you that it created a pull request. That's why I would say that. But yeah, and so now it acknowledges that there's a new branch that's tied to this one. So you have solution here and there's solution there, and they will track with one another anytime you want to push or pull information for this branch from or to or from GitHub. Make sure I get that in order. Okay, so that's great. So now we know we have our work backed up. And if I go to GitHub, I can verify that. And you'll notice that it says right here, solution had recent pushes less than a minute ago. And it gives me an opportunity to do a pull request. This is something that you would do if you're done making changes to a branch and it's ready for review. Like if you're working on a team of people, that's where you'd want to say, hey, I need some other people on the team to look at this and test it out and make sure we're ready to actually merge this into our main branch. And then they would open that and do that, resolve any conflicts, make any further changes, and then merge it in, and then the branch would be deleted. However, for my purposes, I want this solution branch to stay alive because I'm going to have both the solution and the starter code branches available for you guys. Launch Code has their stuff set up that way a lot of times too, where they'll have multiple branches for different things that in and of themselves serve purposes, because it's not necessarily like it would be in a normal development situation where you're using branches as a way to like create code without messing up the main branch. And you make sure it works before you push it, and then your main branch is supposed to represent the most current version of the application. But that's not what I'm doing here. And for you, for this assignment, you're just going to stay on the main branch, so you don't have to worry about that at all. You'll just push directly to main. But you're getting a little extra education in the process, okay? All right. So we have, I'm going to keep this way. We have our content there, got all of our HTML taken care of pretty much. So it's time to look at the actual styling. So for the CSS, really, you can start with a blank file like this and you can just start adding things. Typically, I kind of will, I like to group things up in a way that makes it easier for me to generally know where to go to look to find them. And so one of the ways I do that is actually exactly the way that Launch Code is asking you to kind of, do one of each, which is to do, oh, I forgot. Okay, so for CSS files, you have to use this type of commenting. That's what that looks like. You can't use the double slash like you do in JavaScript. So I'm going to do one that's like a section for the elements. And then I'll do a section that's for IDs. And then I'll do a section that's for classes. And that way we can make sure we have one of each. And, but The elements are just where you want to style something that already exists in HTML. So like for my body, if I want to just kind of set some things for the whole page, I can do that with body. I want the background color to be white. And you'll notice with colors, there are a certain number of colors that exist by name. And you can look those up online where they have lists of them. You can also do it by actually like doing the hex code, or that's yeah, HSL. RGB is very common because when you're working with monitors, red, green, blue is you know, typical way to kind of how to quantify how the color is being represented. I tend to stick with hex unless I'm doing something super simple like white, and then I just do white. Okay. Font family, we're gonna leave that alone because I'm gonna do a Google font later. So let me just put a comment here. Okay. But let's set the font size to 12 point. See what happens. Did it change anything? Oh, I guess it already is defaulting to 12 point. What happens if we change it to 10? Oh yeah, you see how small that is? Now that's small on a Mac screen with the way that their displays, everything's smaller, but it might actually look pretty, you know, fine on most monitors. But why don't we just why don't we go with 11? Compromise. Okay, so we'll default to for everything on the page to 11 point. We're going to deal with wait. I'll go ahead and do this, and it's not really going to mean anything until we get the Google font in here, but I'll go ahead and do it. The color property represents the color of the text on the page. So by default, I'm going to choose to do 333. That is short for this, but because it's doubled up, you can just do it like this, and it automatically knows to do that. But it's basically just a shade of gray that is a little bit, you know, not quite black. It's off black. And I like that. It's just a little easier on the eyes. You'll notice that everything that's in dark mode these days, that's not black. That's something very similar to this. It's like, you know, 333 or 222 or somewhere in there. Because it's just a little less harsh. Okay. Width. I want the entire body of the page to be 100% of the view width, which means I want it to be 100% of this port, whatever is visible. And if I were to, this would be a good time, I think, to talk about, put cap on that. This would be a good time to talk about developer tools. You can either go into View and Developer if you're in Chrome, Developer Tools. You can go straight to a JavaScript console. There's lots of ways to do this. Or you can right-click on the page and choose Inspect. And again, this is Chrome. I'm not sure exactly how it is in other browsers, but you will get all of this, and you can switch around between, you know, the JavaScript console, the elements on the page. And this little thing right here is an inspector, element inspectors, where you can actually go and look at, so you can see this is the H2, right? If you read that up on the left, and this is a P, and it tells you what color it is, what font it is, what the margin currently is. It gives, and you can kind of see visually, look at this diagram down here. They show you margin, border, padding, and then the item itself, right? So in this case, it's showing that it's got margin, right? Yeah. And, you know, this is just a photo, so it's just, we don't really have anything special about it right now, so it's just image. And yeah, different items have different things. It doesn't have a lot right now because we haven't added a whole lot of extra styling, but as we do, these things will get a little more interesting. But this is a great way to kind of look up and see what's happening. If you can't figure out why something isn't spaced quite right, or, you know, isn't showing up the way you thought it was, go start investigating a little bit, and you might find, oh, I thought I needed to control that on this element, but I actually needed to add that margin on this element, and maybe we can do some examples of that after we start getting some more information in here. Okay, so I'm going to set my height here to view height. Same thing. It's just the height of whatever the viewport is in the browser. I'm going to specify that I want 0 margin and 0 padding. And right now, you might say, well, why not use some padding? Because everything's right up against the edge of the page. I am, but I don't want to control it at the body level. I want to control it elsewhere. Because there's going to be some things that I place into the page that I actually don't want to be against. Like I want them to go all the way to the edges, and we'll see that in just a second. And then this is a special little thing that you pretty much always have to add to most pages. So what this does is it prevents unnecessary horizontal scrolling. Let me see if it was even a problem before. Hold on. Okay. Yeah, so before, can't tell. Yeah, see how it's got a scroll bar at the bottom when I go back and forth? It can do that even if the content isn't pushing it to, like these big photos, and it's annoying. And so the way to get around it is to add this overflow X hidden, and it makes it to where it won't scroll. I mean, I'm sitting here trying to scroll and it just won't. I would have to actually, you pull it over to see the rest of the content. And that's preferable in most situations. So it's a good thing to know about. All right, so I've got that. Let's add some other things. We have our header, right? And we set that header to be, its own little thing up here that just has those two header H1 and H2 tags in it. So let's go, okay, get back to my thing. Let's go style those up a little bit. We've got header. And again, there's no classes or IDs yet. I'm just referring directly to the element itself. And I want this one to have, let me grab this. I don't want to have to type that over. Okay, I'm going to use this green background color. And you can see that when you hover over this in VS Code, it gives you a color picker, and you can sit here and drag it around and do whatever the heck you want. I'm assigning it height auto because I want the height to be dependent on the height of its content. So whatever it puts inside, it'll adjust for that. But I also don't want those things to be right up against the edges. So I put padding of 20 pixels. So you can see the 20 pixels here, and then there's a little more than 20 pixels here just because the H1 itself has some margin on the top, and that's adding to it. And then the actual margin of the header I want to be 0 for the same reason that the padding is 0 on the body, because I want it to go all the way to the edges like that, and I don't want there to be any space between the header element here and the whole body. Does that make sense? Because margin's always what's on the outside, and padding's what's on the inside. So I have to specify that in order to make it all. And I want to say, okay, let me see if I can demonstrate. Yeah. So if I change that to margin 20, you can see it's pushing it away from the edges, right? So by specifying 0, it's going to force it to stay right there. And then similarly, if I was to add, 20 pixels of padding, it does that to everything on the page. It pushed everything away. But if I want to be able to have that header be all the way up against the edge, I can't have that here. I have to have it be 0 on the body level. And then I can control what I want. So if I don't want all of this stuff under here to be right up against the edge, then I'll control it with main, which we're going to do next. So I've got some notes in here, so I'll copy this over. Okay, so for main, same thing. I want to make sure that the width is 100% of the view width. And I also could actually do 100% here, and I think it would still be fine because it would be 100% of body because that's the parent of this, right? Main is inside body. And if the parent is, 300 pixels, this would be 300 pixels wide. As it turns out, the body is the whole entire width. So this will be the same. But padding, we want to have 30 on top and bottom so that your content here is not right up against the header and also not right up against your footer. So you see it now we've got a solid, 30 pixels extra now between here and here. And you'll notice that we've got 100 pixels on the left and the right here and here. And, forget about our images because we're not there yet. And then our footer is now doing this funny little thing where it's crammed down in the bottom. So we'll take care of that next. And this last thing I've got a note about this. This box sizing border box, what's the quickest way to explain this? The browser has a behavior that if you specify that the width is 100%, and you want it to just naturally take 100% of whatever is available to you from the parent component, if the parent component has some padding, it will ignore it. And then it actually pushes everything over. Oh, I forgot that it does that. Hang on. Okay, there. So if I take this off, you'll notice now that this stuff is going off the edge of the page because it's treating this as if this entire thing is 100% as in 100% of the width, and it's not accounting for that padding that we set. So in order to account for that, we do box setting border box, and that takes care of it. And it basically says, take the width of the whole thing and subtract the padding out. And now that's, that's the amount of width that you have. Does that make sense? I don't know why. I think that it should default the other way, and I don't know why, but this is how you get around it. So, and I have to do it often. In fact, sometimes you'll see that people will just apply box sizing to the whole page, just blanket, just so that they don't have to keep doing it in multiple places. Okay, so now I've applied some things to our footer here. I've given it the same background color as above, and text is going to be white. We have to specify that here, just like, well, not just like, yeah. So the text is still black here, right? Or off black, I guess, because that's our. We're gonna fix that. Instead of doing it at the level of the header, we're gonna do it at the level of the H1 instead. But down here, we can just pretty much say we want everything inside the header to always have white text. So if I place it here in the, in the footer, if I place it here in the footer, then everything will inherit that. If anything I put inside the footer is going to inherit that, and it'll use this as the color instead of the body color. So I've set it to align everything to the center. Have an auto height, just like I did with the header, so that it just adopts, it just basically forms it up around whatever the content is. So if I had more content in there, it would be higher. And then I've done kind of similar thing, 20 pixels of padding around the text here, but no margin because we want it to be right up against the edge of the page. And then we have our article that I had done over here. Sorry, not being very articulate. Yeah, so the entire recipe itself is inside this article. And there's not a whole lot here that's actually really, let me see, hang on a second. Expandable content centered. I'm actually not sure if we need this because of some changes that I made before I started this. Yeah, I'm gonna skip that for right now, and we'll get back to it if we actually need anything. Sorry about that. I told you guys I converted this from the REPL exercise that I had before, and in the process of doing so, I changed some things, and now I think that's like not necessary. But let's address, I told you we had 4 different header heading tags, heading 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so let's manage those right now. Okay, so that's interesting, right? Oh, that's because that's our, that's my Google font that we haven't installed yet. So interesting thing, when you have font families that you have, but for some reason it can't find it, if you have a backup, it'll automatically go to whatever the browser's default is. So that's why it's got this Lucida script here. I think that's what it is, or so I have something. Anyway, but if I take that off, then it's going to go back to defaulting to Times New Roman. Same here, because I don't have that Google font set up yet. But you can see that I decided to make some changes. Before, the font size was considerably smaller, and I wanted it to be much bigger. So I've and this rem means relative to the native, the default size. So basically it means it's 3.5 times 11 points, because that was actually the default for the page. And you might sometimes see M instead of rem. If you see that, it means it's not relative to the body's default. It's just relative to whatever the default is that it's in right now based on what its parent decided. And I guess maybe, so like for instance, if I had said here, I want all of the text in the footer to not just be white, but to also be, 14 point, then if I had something else that was inside there and I wanted to give it a font size of like, 2M, it would just do 2 times 14 point, make it 28 point based on the parent that it's in, but not based on the whole body. Putting that R in there makes sure that it's consistently based on what the body is. So that's 3.5 times 11 point. The weight, that has to do again with the font family, so we'll take that out for now. I'll do that here too, just to be consistent. Okay, and then yeah. Okay, so everything's still, you can see the sizes are changing. The H1, oh, I know why that's, okay, you'll notice that's still not white, right? It's because I'm going to handle that with an ID when we get to the point of adding IDs to things. The thing you have to remember is if you add blanket styling to an element, it basically means anywhere on the page, if you continue to use that same element, it's going to apply that styling every single time. But you can use something like an ID to actually override what's here. And this is already overriding whatever the default behavior would be. But you can override it further with something like an ID. So yeah, so we'll see that in a second. And same with classes. And all I did here was just kind of adjust, some margins. By the way, just so you understand, you're going to see this a lot of different ways. If you're not familiar with how this works, you can have 3 or 2 or 1 of these. No, you can have 1, 2, 3, or 4 of these. If you have 4 of them, it means top, right, bottom, left. It goes clockwise from top. If you have 3 of them, it means top, left and right, or right and left, and then bottom. If I was to only have 2, then it would be top and bottom and right and left, or you could just say, vertical and horizontal. And then if you only have 1, it means apply them to all directions, to all 4 of them. So if you see it different ways, just keep in mind that it ultimately is just based on top clockwise, and then anything you leave off the end means that it defaults to whatever was, 2 over. So we have a top and we have a right and we have a bottom, which means left automatically takes whatever's here for right because we left it off. Is that clear? Something else we could do here, if we know we're really not going to need any of them except for that 10 pixels to get to it, is we could actually say margin bottom 10 pixels. And then it would specifically only do that. But then you have to make sure you only have one of them because it only is expecting one. And I use them both, but I think for these purposes, I wanted to do it in a way that you could see it in context with the top and the left and the right as well. Okay, for H2, you see we have changed this size to be 1.5 times size the default. And I use text transform to make it uppercase. On this one, I have changed the color, I've changed the size, and also did a little bit of adjustment here on the margin, which will it'll be easier to see once we get everything else set up, and also when we get the other font in place, the Google font, because I think it actually looks, I did that because of the Google font. But anyway, you kind of see the idea. I took all 4 of these and I made customizations to them. Okay, so let's talk about the paragraph and the image and the HR. Yeah, let's get these in here. And all right, so the P tag, highly common. You'll see that I've set it now to justify. So just so you can see, let me pull this over. I'm going to comment that out so that you can see without. Okay, see how it doesn't have that nice clean line there because it's left justified? I set it to justify so that it would be lined up on both the left and the right. And I just think it looks a little bit cleaner for regular paragraphs, so I decided to do that. On the image, I have now told it must have a width of 250 pixels exactly. There are also properties like max width and min width that you can use to make things a little more adjustable. In this case, I wanted it to be just to be static. And I also gave it a margin on the top and the bottom just to make sure it doesn't push right up against other things. And that goes for all images. So no matter what image, unless I override it with a class or an ID or something, this is what it'll have. So we should go down and expect to see the same width on both images. See that? Okay, so that's good. Now they're still kind of, just sitting over there in between things on the left, and that doesn't look very nice, but we'll fix that in a second. Okay. Now let's see what happens with the, oh, I don't think I even put those in. Okay, hang on a second. I gotta reference my original code. Yeah, so there's something that I forgot to add to the content. I have on here, and I seriously remember using these because it was about the only exciting thing you could do visually in 1995, was to use these hard rules that just put a line to kind of, put a little visual interest and break things up on the page. And so I've got one of them there, and I also intended to put one at the top of the variation, yeah, right here, to kind of break that up from the recipe itself. So it's just a plain, browser default thin gray. And if we could really see it more close up, probably you'd be able to tell that it has a little bit of like a drop. It's not a shadow, it's a what is it? What do you call that? Where it looks like it's in relief. Anyway, we're gonna customize it though, because we want it to look big and bold and have a color and to not have any sort of dimensionality. We're gonna make it super clean. So in order to do that, I'm gonna grab this. We're gonna drop this into our styles for our elements and say that all HRs should be this high. And there again, I'm referencing the font, the default font size in order to get that. You don't have to do that. You could do it in numbers of pixels. It's really up to you. There's lots of choices for that, and there are really very little wrong choices for something like that. Background color is the same as our others. And I specified border none because I didn't want it to have any other strange behavior. But, and then I adjusted the white space because it was, I think without this, if I remember correctly, it was like right up against the paragraph. Yeah, I didn't like how close it was to that paragraph. So I decided to push it. But I also did not want it on the bottom, and that'll become clearer once our picture is out of the way, because when this is right below this, these already have a lot of margin on top. So it looks like, super far away. So I made sure this one was 0 on the bottom. Okay. All right, now let's talk about our links. We have blue and purple, right? And underlines and stuff like that. So what I did is I decided that I wanted to customize some things. So for the general A tag, this anchor tag in general, I want it to always be this color, which is a little darker than normal, the color we have here. I want it to be bold, and which doesn't mean a whole lot. Yeah, it's bolding it, but it's going to look different when I change the fonts. And then I wanted to have it be a different color when I hover over it, and also a different color if it's been visited. And they do that too, right? Because they had that purple. So I've changed it to like a dark green. And then this is like, even lighter than the other color. So it should have a good contrast against this one. And this important means sometimes there's behavior in the browser and it isn't overriding it like it's supposed to. So you can coerce it and force it to override the default behavior with this important. You have to kind of use that carefully, but in something like this, it's not a big deal. And I wanted it to be there, so I coerced it. So now you can see, when I hover over, you can see the color changes. And that to me is kind of how I prefer to identify it rather than using an underline. I usually just have it in bold, have it in some sort of color that pops out a little bit, and then make sure, I retain that cursor pointer, which you can have a pointer on anything, but it automatically comes built into an anchor link, so I didn't need to. But if I wanted to put, if I wanted to make this look like it was clickable, my images, I could just add cursor pointer, and then come over here and it looks like it's clickable. It's not, but it looks like it is because I changed the cursor. You can do it with anything, whether it actually has a link or not, or whether it's a button or not. So a little lesson for you there. Okay, and that's pretty much it. These, this hover and visited, those are called pseudo selectors. So yeah, that's what those are called. It basically just means that you have something, but in certain states, you can give it other properties. So when it's in the state of being hovered over, you have a different color. When it's in the state of having been visited already, you give it a different color, if that makes sense. Okay, so let's do some IDs and some classes, and then we're almost done. So to demonstrate how to use an ID, I want to come over here and well, let's place the styling in here first. Let's just think about it. We're going to take this page title up here, and we're going to make it white, and we're going to center it. And yes, I have this commented out, and I think it's because I meant to get rid of it. It threw me off. Sorry, guys. Okay, so I have it in here, but it's not attached to anything yet because this is special, right? This isn't just a regular element. It's an ID, so we have to actually add it to the element we want to. So if we come up here to our header section and we find that H1, all we do is go inside this tag and say ID equals, and then we gave it that name. Now here, there's no hashtag like you see in the file itself, but that basically is what tells you it's an ID. It's got that hashtag, it's an ID, and so it'll be ID equals in the actual HTML element. Is that clear? The thing about an ID is that you only give it to one thing. It can't be reused in multiple places on the page. So if you want to do that, you use classes, and we'll do those in just a second. So I've got an ID for this, and now that you see you can see that it's white, it's centered, and I was able to have some very particular behavior just for that one thing by giving it that ID and applying some attributes to it. And then let's do the tagline similarly. It's already, and I realize I probably could have handled this with other things, but just for the sake of being able to demonstrate this, I'm kind of contriving to handle it with IDs. And this one, I say I want to make sure it has, why isn't it centered? Oh, because I haven't applied it yet, of course. Okay, so I'm going to take that tagline and I'm going to copy it and come over here, and I'm going to apply it here. And there it is. Now it's white, it's centered, and yeah, okay. Yeah, and it got rid of that extra spacing because I set the margin to 0. That's what that was. Okay. And then the last one I'm going to do is the intro section, because I want the intro to be italicized. So I'm going to do font style. That'll take care of that. And I'm going to do margin bottom, 20 pixels to give it a little more space between there and the HR. So this is actually, yeah, okay. I think it's going to adjust itself a little bit when we change the font. This type of thing here, I could have done this on the, okay, hold on, let me show you what I'm talking about. I could have done this on this to the P element, but then it would have applied to all of the P's, right? And I also have one of those down here and one of those down here. So I only wanted it to apply to this very specific one. And so that's why I decided to use an ID. And that way it only changes this paragraph, but not the others. And if we go back up now, we can see that it's italicized. Okay, 2 last things. We want to style these photos and get them positioned where we want and looking a little bit different. So, sorry, again, I'm doing here. Okay, let's go back to here. And we'll go ahead and add those classes in. So in order to do that, where I only have to write it once, but we can apply it to both of them, I'm gonna do them with classes. Classes are created with a dot, like you see there. That's how you identify it in the CSS file. We're gonna use a property called float to make the image float to the right of the text. And then because it's floating to the right, I want a little bit of extra space to the left of, of the photo, so that the text isn't right up on it, So let's go and apply that to our photo or images. So just like with the ID, you don't actually put the dot here, you only do that in the CSS file. So all I have to put here is right. And you'll notice now that the photo is very nicely lined up on the right. If I do the same thing to the other photo, it should do the same and line up, and they're overlapped. Oh, it's because this has gotten squished. That's still interesting. Why is it doing that? Okay. I'm not going to worry about it right now because we're not done. Okay. And then the other thing is on the border, we want these to have a little bit of a border to them. So we can actually have a separate style for that. And you could just kind of put all of this in the image thing, but what if we wanted to have other images on the page that were styled differently, then we need a way to handle it. Or maybe we want this border to be able to be applied to something other than an image. We can still use this class on other things. It just so happens that we're only going to use it on the images for now. 42920 1. This is why I copy and paste things, guys. Okay. And then padding 0, because we want it to be right at the, yeah. Okay. Now this border thing, you can have a lot of things attached to it. This says how thick to make it. This says whether it should be solid or dashed or dotted. There's lots of opportunities to try different things there. And then of course the color. There's actually separate properties for these. You could do like, border color. Actually, you can see a lot of them right there. Yeah, border color, border style, border, like I said, there's lots. Anyway, these are the ones you use the most. So if you want to just combine them all together, you just do border. And that's a little bit like what I was explaining before about whether you choose to do margin with multiple things, or if you just do like margin with one direction and give it one value. Okay, so let's apply that bordered to these as well. Image, here we go. Now, when you have more than one class to apply to something, all you do is put them spaced out in that same place. So class equals, and then in quotes, you just put as many classes as you have. You don't need to use commas or anything. You just put a space between them and you're done. Now that's why you will find that some, like if you want to have something with a more complex name, like page title, that's why I hyphenated it. That's normally the convention is to hyphenate it. And that way you can have multiple words describe it, but it retains its individual identity without you having to worry about spacing or anything. With classes, that really comes in handy when you have multiple things. Okay, we'll do the same thing here. Okay, and now we've got that. Okay, there's some behavior here that I'm not quite understanding the way this is. Let me try something here. Huh. I bet I know why. Floating images to the right is a tricky business. Like where you place them will like determine where they are. And I lined this up with the top of the H3 here, right? The directions. And so that's why it's putting it there. And if I had moved the image in here, if I had put them both here together, then they would both be up here side by side. So to get them to where one's on top of the other, and without being able to use any more fancy CSS than we're using right now, the easiest way is just to move it. But you also have to have enough text in order to take up the space to get it that way. And I think one thing that might have been affected is when I decided to do a default size of 11 instead of 12. I think that might have contributed to it a little bit. Still not sure why it's yeah, it's making me push it way over and over again. Okay, my other version of this, guys, it wasn't doing this, I promise. Of course it's doing it now, right? I'm gonna change that back. So here's what I'm gonna do to get around it. I'm going to just say, let's just make it to where it'll appear a little bit further down in the text, and that way chances are it won't ever. Yeah, so like what if I put it halfway through here? Yeah, see, and the only thing that's messy about that is that happens, right? And you can't really control. This is why CSS has come a really, really long way in the last 15 plus years. And so you're going to learn better ways to do all these things. But for now, you just kind of have to play around with it and get it the way that you want it. And there's other ways to handle it, but I don't want to go anything too complex because you guys are new at this. Let's just leave that for now. It's good enough. And it is also, kind of spilling over into our variation section, but that's okay. Everything adjusts for it, right? And you end up with, you know, most of your, you know, your margins and all that kind of stuff kind of take care of, because we had that margin left, that 20 pixels that we added there to make sure things didn't come up right on it, so it looks all right. Okay, so last thing to do is Google Fonts, and then we'll talk about some general stuff before we finish. We're almost done, promise. Okay, so on Google Fonts, we get to, let's now I can see it. Google Fonts is fantastic. They add to them all the time, and they make it really easy for you to be able to plug them into your stuff. So I already know which ones I want. There are hundreds, if not thousands. So let me forget the right names. So the first one I want is one called Nunito. Oh, that's not what I mean. I'm putting it into the custom text thing instead of. Okay, so Nunito, here it is, Nunito and Nunito Sans. I happen to want this original one that has the kind of fun, you know, soft edges. So if I click on that, I can say, select this style, and I could add different weights to it. So if I add that, it's got, you know, weight 200, the extra light, the regular, 600, 700. I'm trying to remember. Let me check something on my other file. Hang on a second. And make sure I get the right ones. Dancing script is 700. Okay, yeah. So I want 200, 400, 700 for this one to match with the stuff I've already got in my code. So let me make sure to do that. And you see that it keeps updating this, you know, style sheet link that we're going to add into our HTML head with the name of the font, the family, and its weights as I'm adding to it. And now I can also go and see if it'll let me do it. Did it disappear? I don't know if it took it away or not. You used to be able to do this with multiple ones at a time, so I'm trying to figure out why. All right, let's look at the other one. It's okay, because I've got what I need elsewhere. Dancing script, there it is. Okay, so this is the other one I want to use, and I could, same thing here, I could kind of say, okay, I want to use 400 and 700. And so it gives you both the link that you need for your HTML page to link it in. And then it also gives you the CSS rules, the font family, and you've seen this already in our CSS file. So you need both. So we will, and I already have one of these that has both of the families I want, both the dancing script and Nunito. So I'm going to grab it from my other thing, and I'll show you how to put it in. So we'll go to our index and go to the top. And then make sure, because this is also a style sheet, but it's secondary, you want to make sure to put it after your link to your style.css file. Okay, that's important. But this is it. This is just the same thing that from the Google Fonts page. It's just that it's got the original family and its weights. And then it has an ampersand right here with the second family equals Nunito. So you can see it's got both of them in the same link. That's what I was trying to do before, but it wasn't letting me. So once it's here, it's linked in, it means that it will be able to apply it into the page. So then you just have to specify where it's to be used over in here. So let's get that back from this one's the Nunito one. So our did you see that? How it changed? Okay, so I'll show you again. There's times. There's Nunito. Boom. We got ourselves a Google font. Doesn't that look nicer? It's more modern, cleaner, and it's special, you know? It's not same old, same old. And we're setting and 400 is generally like your normal font weight. So that's kind of redundant, but we're setting it just so that it has a baseline, because we might choose to have it be different in other places. Like right now, it's defaulting to that for these, even though we actually are going to specify, oh man, clicking the wrong thing, specify other things instead. So let's go over to here. So our H1 at the top of the page, it's currently defaulting to the new default, Nino, but we're going to make it dancing script. And here we're going to make it bolder by slightly, ever so slightly, by changing it to 700. H2, we want to be 700. Yeah, which it evidently already was. And so we're just going to keep doing that and making sure. So our H3 headers here now are going to be dancing script as well. Yeah, gradients and directions. And then the H4, which is here. Oops. I need to get out of here. By the way, though, just before I get out of here, let me just show you so you can see. You can see now that we've added a bunch of styling. See how it says image.right.bordered? That tells you that it's got the classes right and bordered applied to this. And you can see there's that left margin that I added, that extra 20 to give it a little more cushion between the text. And then it also has the margins that was ordinarily applied to it from the image itself. And then if you go to here, it still just says H3 because everything's taken care of there. And if you come to, let's see, now that's not centered. Did I forget to put that in there somewhere? Footer. All right, let's go check the footer here. I'll check it against my, yeah, I think I forgot to put it in. Wait, oh no, it's there. Okay, so that's interesting. This will happen, guys. Why would it not be aligning the text that's in my footer, do you think? Why would it not be centering it?
Because footer is not an inline element.
Say it again.
Is it because footer is not an inline element?
It shouldn't matter because I set it up the same way that I did on the header. And it did it on the header. So I'm not sure why, unless it shouldn't have anything to do with that. Quandary. That's interesting. Okay. Well, it's almost 9 o'clock, so I am not going to try to figure it out right this second. I will figure it out and then post some sort of note on this when I get it all posted up for you guys about how I solved it. Okay, so I probably have just not copied everything perfectly from this other one the way I had it. So I was trying to rush through. Mainly right now, all I want to do is just point out that while we did a lot, we actually didn't have to do a ton to make major changes to the way this thing looks. Like if I go back over into here and take the styling away altogether, let's just take the style sheet away. We're back to where we were at the beginning, right? With all the browser defaults, and then all we did was add some colors and some margins and padding and a couple of nice looking fonts, and everything looks so much better. So you do not have to work super hard to get something nice looking. And I know for some people that's excruciating. Doing the design part is not your favorite, and I don't understand that because it is my favorite personally. But I also understand the opposite of that. So it doesn't have to be painful, and you can't you can go into any website you want, honestly, and look at their things. So like, I don't know, let's go to, all right, let's pick a website. It's something I was at, oh, one of the resources that I had. Okay, hang on. That's what I was going to show you guys. I wanted to show you guys these resources. So I've got some websites in here, things that you can go and look at different things. This is kind of fun. So where's the, sorry guys, hang on. That's not the one that I wanted, and I thought I had it open already. Okay, well, we'll just go with this one. Okay, so this is probably going to be complicated because of the type of website it is, but let's try it anyway. You can go anytime to this and go to view source, and it'll show you another website's like stuff. Now, if they have a bunch of DOM language like this, which you guys are only just about to learn soon, then you won't actually see most of the stuff on the page. So that's why I wanted to find a page that I knew you would be able to see it, and I didn't. Pages have gotten bigger and more complex than they used to be. You guys are writing a simpler page, and believe it or not, those are actually harder to find. But in any case, my point is just that, like if I go to the source of my own page, you can see everything here, right? And so if you are on other people's websites and they have a simple enough page, and you want to say, how did they do that? Go and look. And actually, I mean, you can use the regular dev tools to do that, because if you are clicking on something and say, okay, I want to know how they did that border, for example, on this, you can see that right now I've clicked on this. You can click around between the different ones and look at them, and it shows you what their properties are on the styles. If you're on the styles tab right here, you've got this different stuff, but styles. So, and you can like take stuff away and add it back. You can edit it. So you can sit here and play with stuff in the browser just to get a sense of like what you might want to do differently, or what you think might need to be there. And yeah, like I could sit here right now and just take that margin left away, and you probably won't notice anything because the text isn't right up against it. So that's a bad example. What if I made it 200 instead? Yeah, there you go. So these tools allow you to just sit here and mess around with things, and it can be really useful for figuring out what things do when you are still just not sure what it all means. This can kind of help you pin it down. So I definitely recommend spending some time like kind of playing around with all of that. Let's see, anything else here? Yeah, I've got several resources here for ways to go look up like units for height and width and fonts. If you do want to embed images from Google Drive, although for your assignment, you specifically need to create an images folder and drop them in. So this would just be for your own knowledge. And yeah, the kind of more about the semantic elements from W3 Schools like I've had here. So you can definitely come in here and take a look around and get some more information. And I wish I could find the other thing. I'll find the other thing that I had that I wanted you to look at. It's a really cool resource with actually, I think the reason I can't find it is because it's in the instructions. It's not mine, it's theirs. Yeah, okay, so here in the CSS, the part 2 file, Zen Garden right here, one of the resources they list for you. I don't know if you guys have looked at this yet. This is super cool. So they basically have the same page, but you can keep looking at it with different themes. So this guy has, his version of it. And then you can go and look at somebody else's design. And oh, that is not what I wanted. That must be broken. Yeah, and you can keep seeing how they've got the exact same content, but with completely different looks. I mean, very different looks, but it's all the same content. So CSS is very powerful. You can have a lot of fun with it. That's all I'm gonna say about that. Okay, who has questions? Anyone?
I have a question real quick.
Mhm.
So hypothetically, if you're going to be referencing maybe outside articles or images that are that need to be cited,
Mhm.
where would you put like a source cited or a source cited page, or is that necessary? Where would that? How would you go about that?
You could put like maybe something at the bottom for yourself if you want to. There's actually in the okay, and I do have a link to that, so hang on. Yes, in here. Thank you. Okay. Is this the one? No. Yes, here, this one. Okay. This page talks about the semantic elements, and one of the ones that they introduce is Fig and Fig Caption. You can actually create, yeah, right here. So they have a way now for you to like bundle together a picture and its caption.
Oh, okay.
So you use Figure, and that it encloses both the image and its caption. And this is what it looks like. So you'll have the photo, and then you have the little section, and it keeps it all lined up and keeps it all together for you by putting it in that Figure tag.
I see. Okay.
So if you wanted to do a quick, like, courtesy of whatever and link it, you could just do that right here, and it wouldn't take up very much space.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be one way to do it.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Okay, I just wanted to finish up a little bit here to show that once we have finished putting the rest of the changes in here with the CSS and the Google fonts, I'm going to go ahead and do one more commit to the repository and just say git status to check and see what files are there. And then we will do git add dot to include everything. And then if we do git status one more time, we can see that everything is ready to be staged. And then git commit with a message, we will just say added CSS styling and Google fonts to page. Okay, that pretty much covers it. And you can see I'm still on my solution branch, so I'm going to push that. And this time I can push just by saying git pushed because that upstream path has already been set. And you can see right there, it says that it has resolved it and completed it. And so now if we go back over to, let me get this where I can see the whole thing. If we go back over here to our GitHub repo, it says that it just had a push, and I could do a pull request if I wanted to. I kind of talked about that before. I don't need to because of I'm going to leave everything in the solution branch as is. But I do want to show you what it looks like to actually deploy this so that it can be viewed by other people from GitHub on GitHub pages. If you go to settings right here at the top of your repository, and go down to pages. Right here, you can actually decide what the source is going to be. And in my case, because we did all of our work on solution and not on main, I'm going to choose solution here because that's what I want to be shown whenever you go to my page here, and it's going to give us that link in a second. But most of the time, if you have all of your changes on main or master, you would just choose main or master. But whichever one you choose, if that's the one you want to, that's the version of the code that you want people to see, you just select that there, hit save, and now it gives you what the link is. And it will always be your username.github.io/ and then the name of the repository. So that's a pretty standard, easy to remember. Now, if we open this in a new tab, it's going to say site not found because it takes a few minutes. But if you come back a few minutes later and refresh on that, it will be there, and it'll look just like it does when it's running on your local port here. So that is all there is to it with GitHub Pages.